the ones who run the home. That is a contractual agreement. That should be looked at under contract law, and it should be looked under employment law, because one of the things that I'd like to focus on is the International Labor Organization. They just came out with a convention, a new treaty for domestic workers. Homemakers are not included. I would like to see homemakers included in that with the same rights as any other domestic worker, and I think that, we need to assert that we have a right to have this recognized. So that's one way of addressing the cultural things that are happening here, and it's not easy. I mean, changing people's ideas, changing the way that people think is probably the most difficult thing in the world. Much more so than passing the laws. But if you want the laws to be implemented, you have to change the way that the people are thinking about, how they're using those laws. Sorry, did you have a
question about what you're talking about, contractual laws and the agreement? I think that has to do with in the history of case law. They say it's always an issue when parents were married, and it's in legislative law in the form of the UCCJEA. But what we need to do is understand better the case law where they established it. Where, like, we hear Barry Goldstein will say things, it never becomes irrelevant that the parents were married because of the contractual law, all of the law that has to do with all the case law that has to do with what you're talking about, the contractual agreement between the parents. But what can anybody cite those cases as what would be necessary to help women?
Yeah. Okay. When I talk about contractual law, I'm talking about very much more general. That's really getting into specific. When I say contract law, because basically contract law, and I'm talking, all over every country in the world. So, but not getting into specific. But to understand contract law, you can have a written agreement with somebody, but also habitual custom becomes a contractual agreement between two people. Even if you don't have a written contract between two parties, if you start doing something, if you start working for somebody and they pay you or whatever, that is a contractual situation and is recognized under the law. So when I talk about, that's what I'm saying when this has to be considered under contract law, that these are, the woman has been taking care of these children for 2, 3, 4, 5, 15 years. That's a contractual agreement between the two parties. Even if nothing ever was signed, she has given up her job and has been taking care of the kids. So even if there is a divorce, there is still, I'm not saying, oh yeah, she should get everything and she, nothing's going to change. Sure, things are going to change, but she has to be empowered to maintain the house, the style and the life for her and her children. And that has become a contractual situation when she stays home and he goes out to work. Even if there's nothing signed there, it really is, it's not, for me, I'm talking more of how we look at things rather than specifics for specific cases. So slide number 9. Okay, this is Francis Fukuyama, and he has nothing to do with the battered mothers and the family law and everything like that. But he is very, very well known politically and amongst lots and lots of people, and great book. So what's important with Fukuyama is state building governance and world order of the 21st century. Basically what Fukuyama looked at was, because with the Republicans, normally the Republicans are, minimize government. And they don't want intervention of government. And the left is more, which in the United States are the Democrats, is more towards, social welfare, enlarging the government and the scope of the government. What Fukuyama looked at and what he demonstrated was where we need to move, and this is in the family courts as well as elsewhere, we need to move towards reducing the size of the government but strengthening the effectiveness of the different agencies. So that's kind of in the political world. This is important, and he is really being listened to, particularly after the global crisis. But for me, we need to do the exact same things with the family courts. That's just a small part of a much, much bigger problem, which is our societies are in a mess. I mean, if we look at the economics, the global economic crisis, this is far from over. I mean, unless we start taking measures, and part of the measures is we need better court systems. I mean, the family courts are not the only ones who are in a mess. If you go into criminal law, you're looking at the same statistics. We have the innocence projects all over the place. The courts are doing a lousy, lousy, lousy job. If you look into, white collar crime, Enron. I mean, these guys, slap them on the hand and, send them off to a country club jail, and that's it. So what's going on in family courts, it's not isolated, and it's not happening, within this other world that's going on, great. It is happening. It's a part of the entire system that really goes back to Reagan and stuff. And if you look at some of my blogs, you might understand that. And I was working up on Capitol Hill at the time under the Reagan years, and quite frankly, that's also why I left. But a lot of the problems and issues that we're looking at today date back to the social programs that Reagan cut. And then also, these people grow up and these problems snowball and they multiply and everything like that. So a lot of what's going on is Reagan's fault, and it's actually Nancy Reagan if you look into it. But anyway, going on to the next slide, which is number 10. I've looked at a lot of the UN reports. The two reports that are here, in-depth study of violence against women. I'm not going to, you can read these. But these are the key issues that need to be examined. Because I think I also need to speed up my time. The next slide, slide 11, the UN report, good practices in combating VAW. This is, I read this at the beginning of my fight and everything like that, and I used it in a lot of my correspondence and my communications with governments and everything. By the way, my case is actually under 3 jurisdictions: the Spanish, the American, and the French. They're going to say, no, it's just the Spanish. No, this comes under if we get into international law, it comes under the 3. So I'm not killing 2 birds with one stone, I'm killing 3 birds with one stone. But anyway, these are good practices. It's out there. It's all in black and white. And all in the studies, I keep on coming. Here's what we got to do. Here's the problem. Here's what you got to do. And none of it's being done. Enable judicial capacity building. Everywhere I look, there's not much capacity building being done amongst judges or lawyers or the court psychologists. In fact, they're just, hire anybody. Duty to ensure gender sensitivity of the judiciary. I'm open. If anybody can tell me where there's a program by some government where they're doing that, I would love to look into it. I haven't been able to find anything. Principle of women's sexual autonomy. Private rights. The feminists, they're going around and around and around and around on the abortion issue. And what I'm trying to explain to the feminists, if you attack the private rights issue, and if you start, building a political ideology for the private rights issue of women, then this does become her body is her rights. And so that's also going to help your abortion issues. And everybody knows, I'm not pro-abortion, I am pro-choice, and my kind of feeling on all of this is let's stop producing societies where we're having these unwanted abortions or we're having these unwanted pregnancies. And that's where we really need to focus. Once again, this gets into, the domestic abuse, as Barry pointed out and Andrew points out and everything. This does, produce the victims become, get into drugs, get into lots of, this does have an effect on the how many young girls we have getting pregnant that don't want to be. So that, to the feminist, I keep on talking about that as well. I don't know if anybody's listening, but it's out there on my blogs. So set standards and policy and practices. Once again, I haven't really found, at least in Spain, not happening. Implement laws, not happening. Function in legal system, not happening. Damages. When I see any kind of damages awarded, I think the most horrific was a case in Spain. And the older sister ended up committing suicide. And I think the father had to pay like $3,000 for the life of this child. I was like, excuse me, $3,000 for a person's life? I would be insulted if I was the mother. Probably throw it in their face and say, my child is worth a lot more than that. So that's another thing. And third parties, that's what my case is pretty much all about. Because I'm exhausting all domestic remedies right now in Spain, and in the next couple of months I'll be filing with under the Convention of Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. So my thing is, no, the third parties, in my case it was the lawyers, need to be held accountable. Well, in my case also it was to stop me building a company. Well, my competitors, TripAdvisor, Yelp.com, they're into the hundred millions of dollars. So I'm like, you guys want to keep on going? Well, I'm going to be going for all damages. So anyway, they might want to think about that. Slide number 12 is again good practices in combating VAW. Issues and problems of the state response to violence against women. Once again, I don't want to spend time reading through all of those, and we've got to wrap it up. So I'll let you read through it. But once again, all of this is there. It's like, what more do you want? You have the problems. Here are what you've got to do. Now do it. Slide number 13. Human rights violations of women in family courts. Maybe we'll talk to a lot of people here. So there's basically two types of violations: your economic rights violations and your custodial rights violation. Again, we got to wrap this up. So I'll let you read through those, at another time. Now, there are two landmarks. Going on to slide 14, there's two landmark cases that we have domestic violence as a human rights violation. The first was the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, Gonzalez-Lenehan versus USA. Some people might be familiar with it, 2011. That was an important case because it was the first case. And basically, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights found the American government guilty of human rights violations under their obligation to protect, which again gets into human rights jargon, their obligation to protect under the principle of due diligence, and they didn't do that. Now that's come back, that was in 2011. In October 2014, there was a meeting on this, from the commission saying, okay, well, how's it going? What's happened in this case? Have you been investigating? Have you held the people responsible that need to be held responsible? And of course the US said, no, we can't do anything. State versus federal issues. This gets into another argumentation in my blogs, which is the sovereignty rights, which the federal state is kind of the same thing as the sovereignty rights. All of these governments are saying, oh, no, we can't do anything. This is their jurisdiction. We can't intervene. We can't say anything. That's human rights law is based on that. No, you have an obligation to not commit genocides, to protect your populations. When you violate that, you lose your defense of sovereignty rights. And that's the same thing with the state-federal issue that we've got going on in the United States. Slide number 15. This is the second jurisprudence that we have. And this was the United Nations Convention of Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, González Carreño versus Spain, 2014. Now, both of these cases, I know, it's a story we all know, is the mom had filed 50 times, there were restraining orders, and nobody did it, anything, and the father ended up killing the children. So both of these cases do that. But now, the González Carreño is important because it did, say that these were stereotypes and that the courts had an obligation to combat that. But now what's interesting in the Carreño case is that the Spanish government claimed inadmissibility of the case because they said that this was a judicial error and that the author hadn't exhausted all domestic remedies within the disciplinary procedure. My case builds on the Carreño case in that I am going through all of the disciplinary procedures and everything like that. And I mean, they're coming up with the most ridiculous stuff. My favorite was the Bar Association in Spain. It was the right of my lawyers to violate my rights under the principle of judicial independence. So, and I'm gonna finish this up. So, I mean, I was like, you people, that's ridiculous. And I appealed. I kept on appealing until they told me just go away. And so that's why it's, not, oh, I'm sorry, we've got the other people coming in. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap this up really quickly. Slide number 16, Betty Friedan. I love Betty Friedan. She was saying that this stuff was gonna, coming, and she was talking about all of this stuff back in 1981 in her book, Second Stage. Great, really something. Now, there's this slide 17, that's kind of what I examined in the past 5 or 6 years, all of these different issues, and that kind of, explains how everything's separated. If you move on to slide 18, we got to bring this all together. It's really got to be a united effort. When I talk to the human rights people, they really don't know what's going on. And so that's what there's got to be, bringing it, and that's what I'm working on, trying to bring all of these people together, trying to get leadership. Okay, I've got to finish up. You can go through the rest of the slides. That's kind of, because my case is in Spain, here once again we have a utopian legal system. And the same stuff is happening in the same proportions. And so it's not a legal problem, it is a problem of the ideas and the ideology behind this. Okay, I gotta finish up.
If you have questions or just something, we can email you.
Yeah, you can email me. I have War on Domestic Terrorism is my website. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook. You'll find you can talk to me afterwards this weekend, get my card, So anyway, I'm sorry I didn't have enough time to finish everything, but if anybody has any questions, please feel free. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.